The sun had already risen for several hours, but Anderson, an elderly man of 70, was still lying in his bed in bitter contemplation. Before, at this time, he would have been on his feet and fussing about the household, but now he had no one to take care of. Yesterday, the last chicken and rooster were sold, and the faithful dog had to be given to a dog shelter. At the memory of the only friend, tears came to the pensioner's eyes. If it were not for the circumstances, he would never have done it of his own free will. With longing, Anderson turned his gaze to the portrait hanging on the wall. It depicted a married couple and their 2 children, Dirk and Janet. It had been 30 years since then, and that picture was still dear to the old man, even despite the fact that his wife had abandoned him and their children for another man. He was distracted from his memories by voices echoing in the yard. It was his children, Dirk and Janet, loudly discussing the details of selling their father's house. Anderson sighed heavily, sat down in bed and took one last look around his possessions. This well-built wooden house he had built with his father, but now he would have to leave here for good. The old man did not have to sit alone for long to think. The door unceremoniously opened, and a frail, bald son and a vulgarly and untidily dressed daughter entered the house. Along with the fresh air from the street came the sharp smell of over-drinking, probably from last night's traditional feast. Dirk worked as a handyman in a factory and lived in a dormitory with his unemployed sister in a cramped room. "Hi, Daddy, aren't you packed yet? Hurry up or we'll miss the bus. And then where will you go?" "The buyers are coming to see the house today, and I doubt they'll be happy to see an old man like you here. I don't want the deal to fall through," muttered Dirk. "Yes, Father, you know that I have an operation soon, and without money there is nothing to do in the hospital," added Janet. Anderson looked at his daughter with longing and sympathy. He was well aware of the way of life Janet led, and also dragged Dirk with her. But it was his own daughter, and the elderly man was ready to do anything to help her. That is why he agreed to sell the house and move into a home for the elderly. "Take care of yourself, because you can't fool around with your heart. If you need an operation, you have to accept it," the elderly man said in a trembling voice. They talked for a few more minutes. Dirk described in vivid detail how good it would be for his father to live in a home for the elderly, because the location was gorgeous, the nature was beautiful, and it would be more fun in the company of the same old people. 5 minutes later, all 3 of them were walking to the bus stop. Anderson's children were in a good mood, but the poor elderly man was saying goodbye to his ancestral home forever, and tears were streaming down his wrinkled cheeks. A couple of hours later, having left their father in his new place, in a rather gloomy grey building that had long been in need of repair, the joyful adult children headed toward their father's house to meet the buyer. Dirk and Janet were happy at how cleverly they had managed to deceive the old man. Of course, Janet had no illness, and their only aim was to sell the house as quickly as possible, make a lot of money, and have fun on it. The buyer turned out to be a respectable businessman. He had a businesslike look at the property and had already imagined how he would demolish this old, unnecessary house and build a hotel on the spot. Although Anderson asked the children, but the new owners keep the house as a memento, at least while he was still alive. But for his degraded children, there was nothing sacred left in life except money to spend on booze. The ungrateful couple had been mocking their unhappy old father in every way for years, completely forgetting that the man had raised them. Even their own mother could not stand her children and left for another man. The children behaved disrespectfully from an early age, and in their teenage years, Janet got mixed up with bad company, started running away from home, was rude, and sometimes even raised her hand against the parents. Although Dirk went to college, he soon dropped out, and following his sister, began a dissolute lifestyle. Their mother, Margaret, worked in a factory, and her colleague had long sought her attention, but Margaret was a faithful wife and did not accept his advances. Everything changed that day when the woman had a big fight with her husband. Exhausted with her children, who at such a young age already had a record for theft, she tried to talk her husband into sending them to a special education institution, but he would not agree. Anderson insisted that since they gave birth to them, they should carry this cross for the rest of their lives, but Margaret was not satisfied with such a life. "I don't want to sit and wait for them to eventually do something to us in order to get the inheritance. I mean, they're even stealing money from us now, and you forgive them everything. If you don't agree with my suggestion, then deal with them yourself, and I don't have any more strength," threw desperate Margaret to her husband then. This was the end of the relationship between the spouses, although before that, 15 years of marriage, they made the impression of a happy couple. But finally life in the house became unbearable. That's why Margaret accepted the proposal of a colleague and one day left for good, starting a new, quiet life. Anderson loved his wife and at first took the betrayal very hard, but the thought of children supported him and helped him come to terms with it. As the years passed, nothing improved in the life of the estranged husband. He thought that with love and affection he could change the behaviour of his children, but all he got in return was rudeness, beatings, and demands for money to entertain himself when they were drunk. This went on for almost 25 years until one day, it seemed to Anderson, the children decided to get wise. Dirk got a job and a room in the dormitory, and Janet was supposedly going to follow her brother's example. What the old man didn't know was that Dirk had to get a job because he had to pay child support for his minor daughter. During one more drinking bout, he had the idea to put his father in a home for the elderly and by selling the house get a lot of money. Nothing good awaited Anderson at the nursing home. As Dirk described it to him, the institution was jam-packed with the same abandoned elderly people that the children had gotten rid of. The staff at the orphanage behaved rather indifferently. The only thing that pleased Anderson was the opportunity to take care of the rabbits that were bred on the grounds of the institution. He took care of them, often went to the fields to get grass, and thus distracted himself from sad thoughts and worries about the children. On one sunny summer day, the retiree went, as usual, to his favourite meadow, taking with him in his bag some food and a portrait of his family, which often helped him maintain the strength to go on living. Anderson had already picked up a huge bag of grass and, pulling it out to the curb, sat across it to wipe off his sweat and take a break, and at the same time to admire the picture once again. He was so engrossed in memories that he didn't notice anyone stop beside him. When he noticed the shadow in the phone, he looked up and was dumbfounded. A month passed. The brother and sister had safely squandered all the money from the sale of their father's house and were now walking again, already in a bad mood, in the direction of the nursing home. Dirk was going to start a new life every day, to close the card debt, but his passion for drinking and gambling forced him to spend the money until they ran out altogether. He didn't go to work, of course, and had to move out of the dormitory in a hurry. Knowing that their father still had some savings, the brother and sister decided to visit him, to appease him, and to squeeze out those savings. When they arrived at the orphanage, they were greatly surprised to find that his father did not live there, because an elderly woman had taken him in. Janet and Dirk were happy to hear the news, because now their chances of getting money were much better. They found out the address and went to look for their father. A few kilometres from the nursing home, they saw a huge 2-story mansion and were nearly speechless when the door opened not only their father, but their own mother, whom they barely recognised. Fate itself brought Anderson and Margaret together again, albeit after many years. The woman was on her way home from a walk and saw an elderly man sitting on a sack of grass and looking at an old worn-out picture. When she came closer and saw what was depicted in the photo, she immediately realised that it was her ex-husband, Anderson. Margaret was already single by that time. Her husband, who had become a wealthy man, had died 10 years ago, and their mutual daughter lived in the capital. Having met again, Anderson and Margaret realised that this meeting was given to them to take care of each other in their old age, because there was no one else to take care of. Well, except for the daughter of their good-for-nothing son, about whom they had recently learned. The brother and sister tried again to press pity and spoke of Janet's illness, but Anderson knew by then of their deception, and the guards disgracefully escorted the guests off the premises. And so the ungrateful children left, without getting anything more from their elderly parents, because even strong parental patience can run out one day.